How are you doing on this lovely Sunday? I am back with another one. So, I posted on our community tab a little while ago that I was fired up. I was fired up. And that's because something was brought to my attention that I was previously unaware of. And we're going to get into exactly what is going on. Now, if you've seen the title, you kind of have a hint, right, as to what is happening. Now, I'm not even going to preface it at all. I have an article that they have an audio recording of, and I want us to kind of edge into the topic via listening to this article. And then we are going to have the conversation about exactly how long this has been happening, what your rights are, and what's going on in the legal world in regards to what has been happening with the DNA of newborn babies. All right. So, hello to everyone who is in the chat. Shout out to Black Anonymous and Gerald Flood. And shout out to all of my amazing viewers who are in the bushes today. All right. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. Let's get right into it. I'm going to share my screen. I always announce when I'm sharing my screen. Again, why I do that, who knows? All right, so you can see my screen, I believe. Yeah, perfect. The Wired is trying to sell me a subscription. I am not buying it. Okay. Now, here's the title of the article before I play the audio. Police used a baby's DNA to investigate its father for a crime. Small pinpricks of blood are used to screen newborns for serious health conditions, but this genetic data can have legal uses too. All right, so I'm not going to preface it any further. We're just going to scroll down to the audio recording they have of this article. Where is it? I accidentally scrolled past it the first time, and I think I may have done that again. Let's see. Be patient. Be patient, Felicia. Okay, activating my patience. Scrolling much slower to allow us to find. Here it is. Here we go.
You're listening to What's New with Wired. It's Tuesday, August 16th. I'm Zeke Robison. Today we're talking about how small pinpricks of blood are used to screen newborns for serious health conditions, but this genetic data can have legal uses too. Make sure to listen to the end to find out what other Wired podcasts you can check out today. If you were born in the United States within the last 50 or so years, chances are good that one of the first things you did as a baby was give a DNA sample to the government. By the 1970s, states had established newborn screening programs in which a nurse takes a few drops of blood from a pinprick on a baby's heel, then sends the sample to a lab to test for certain diseases. Over the years, the list has grown from just a few conditions to dozens. The blood is supposed to be used for medical purposes. These screenings identify babies with serious health issues, and they have been highly successful at reducing death and disability among children. But a public records lawsuit filed last month in New Jersey suggests these samples are also being used by police in criminal investigations. The lawsuit, filed by the state's Office of the Public Defender and the New Jersey Monitor, a nonprofit news outlet, alleges that state police sought a newborn's blood sample from the New Jersey Department of Health to investigate the child's father in connection with a sexual assault from the 1990s. Crystal Grant, a technology fellow at the American Civil Liberties Union, says the case represents a whole new leap forward in the misuse of DNA by law enforcement. It means that essentially every baby born in the U.S. could be included in police surveillance, she says. It's not known how many agencies around the country have sought to use newborn screening samples to investigate crimes, or how often those attempts were successful, but there is at least one other instance of it happening. In December 2020, a local TV station reported that police in California had issued 5 search warrants to access such samples, and that at least one cold case there was solved with the help of newborn blood. This increasing overreach into the health system by police to get genetic information is really concerning, Grant says. Privacy activists have also raised alarms about what they see as similar misuses of other kinds of DNA collection. In a recent case, police in San Francisco used a sample collected during a woman's rape exam to tie her to an unrelated property crime.
So, in case you're just joining us, let me catch you up. Hello again to everyone in the chat. Shout out to Naps, all right, the artist formerly known as Nappy Yankee. So, if you're just joining us, I was very fired up a few days ago. I took to the community tab of the channel to let you all know that we would be discussing something that came to my awareness that I was extremely concerned about. All right. And so now we are doing just that. To kind of get us into the topic and get some background, we're listening to an article which discusses how New Jersey State Police used a baby's DNA to investigate its father for a crime. Now, when newborn babies are born, usually a very small sample of blood is taken from them, which is supposedly for the purpose of seeing if they have any genetic diseases, any issues, anything that needs to be treated immediately so that they can actually live a long life, right? However, what is being discovered is that that DNA is being kept in databases, and law enforcement is being granted access to that DNA. So now, not only did we hear about this New Jersey instance, we're now hearing about a woman who was actually the victim of a crime and whose DNA was taken in regards to her being a victim. And then that DNA was used to prosecute her. Now, that's a separate conversation, right? But it fits into the larger conversation of when you give your DNA under certain circumstances, should law enforcement then be allowed to use it under any circumstance they deem appropriate? Right. And when you give your DNA to an entity that isn't law enforcement, a hospital, a school, right, a different organization, should they be permitted to hand your DNA over to law enforcement? Right. So let's continue.
Years later, Chesa Bodine, who was then the city's district attorney, called this use of the woman's DNA a violation of her Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches and seizures and ultimately dropped the charges. The New Jersey lawsuit alleges that police obtained the blood sample of a newborn child, who is now elementary school aged, to perform a DNA analysis that linked the baby's father to a crime. This was done using a technique called investigative genetic genealogy, or forensic genealogy. It usually involves isolating DNA left at a crime scene and using it to create a digital genetic profile of a suspect. Investigators can upload this profile to genealogy websites where other people have freely shared their own DNA information in the hope of connecting with family members or learning about their ancestry. Because DNA is shared within families, investigators can use relative matches to map out a suspect's family tree and narrow down their identity. According to the New Jersey lawsuit, police had reopened an investigation into a cold case and had used genetics to place the suspect within a single family, one of several adults or their children. But police didn't yet have probable cause to obtain search warrants for DNA swabs from any of them. Instead, they asked the state's newborn screening lab for a blood sample of one of the children. Analysis of this genetic information revealed a close relationship between the baby's DNA and the DNA taken at the crime scene, indicating that the baby's father was the person police were seeking. That was enough to establish probable cause in the assault investigation, so police sought a warrant for a cheek swab from the father. After analyzing his DNA, the suit contends police found that it was a match to the crime scene DNA. Jennifer Salidi, an attorney with the Office of the New Jersey Public Defender, which is representing the father, says combining newborn screening samples with genetic genealogy opens the door for virtually anyone's DNA to be used in a criminal investigation. This is like a dystopian onion. Every time we peel back another layer, we find some new violation of privacy, she says. The lawsuit targets the New Jersey Department of Health and the state-run lab that conducts newborn screening. In an email to Wired, Nancy Kearney, a spokesperson for the department, said they do not comment on pending litigation. She did not respond to a request to comment more generally on the department's policies regarding retention or use of newborn screening samples. When contacted by Wired, a spokesperson for the New Jersey
So I'm going to hop in here just to answer a few questions. So Kimberly Callahan, hello Kimberly. I think I said hi, but just in case I didn't. Kimberly says, question, did they suspect the baby's father of a crime or is this just a routine thing they do? So, according to what we've heard thus far, and we will dive deeper into this actual case, but according to what we've heard thus far, the baby's father was suspected of being involved in this crime from way back in the 90s, right? Now, the question that we do not know the answer to as of yet is how law enforcement became aware that this man had a baby, right? Because that's how they were able to get the DNA. So the baby's father was a suspect in a crime that happened in the 90s. And then I believe in either 2020 or 2021, right? Years later, he then has a child. So the question is, how did they even know that he had a child? I don't know. That's another conversation, right? The DNA from his newborn baby was then handed over to New Jersey State Police, and that DNA was used to link him to the crime. So he was already a suspect. He was already suspected, right? All right. Black Anonymous has a question. Black Anonymous says, I wonder if one gives DNA to something like Ancestry.com, does Ancestry give the DNA to law enforcement? So that's a very good question. Now, when you give your DNA to Ancestry.com or what is it, 23andMe or any of these folks, you sign, or rather, you acknowledge some documents. I have never sent my DNA into these folks, but I imagine that if you were to read the fine print in those documents, they are advising you that they can now use the DNA that you have given them. It is now their property because you are handing it over to them. So Ancestry.com and 23andMe and all of these folks, they are within their right to share your DNA with law enforcement. Now, again, the larger conversation is that constitutional? And that's the conversation that we're going to begin having after we get some background. All right. Hello to a lady 747.
State Police also said that the agency does not comment on pending litigation. A representative from the New Jersey Office of the Attorney General, which is representing the state in the records lawsuit, said the office had no comment. Genetic genealogy was most famously used to identify Joseph James DeAngelo as the Golden State Killer in 2018. It's since been used by U.S. law enforcement agencies to solve hundreds of violent crime cases, many of which had gone cold for years. The technique is powerful because it gives police access to DNA databases outside of their traditional purview. Until recently, the main database at law enforcement's disposal was the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, which is maintained by the FBI. CODIS contains around 14 million DNA profiles, but there are strict rules for what kind can be submitted. Those of people arrested for or convicted of felonies and unidentified remains. But anyone can take a consumer DNA test and upload their genetic profile to genealogy sites, some of which allow police access. It was only a matter of time before police turned to newborn blood samples, says Natalie Ram, a law professor at the University of Maryland. In this post-Golden State Killer world, law enforcement is now looking around and seeking to identify suspects using genetic samples or genetic data outside of the official law enforcement repositories, she says. In a recent article in the Texas Law Review, Ram analyzed state policies regarding newborn screening programs. She found that while many would theoretically protect these blood samples from police use, other state statutes, such as New Jersey's, are unclear. Because there are no federal laws governing newborn screening programs, states set their own policies on which diseases they test for, how long samples are stored, and how they can be used. Some states hold on to blood samples for months, others for years or decades. Virginia only keeps samples from infants with normal results for 6 months, while Michigan retains them for up to 100 years. New Jersey stores samples for 23 years before destroying them. There are so many ways that genetic material can be misused, and storing it for 23 years is just a recipe for that misuse to happen, Salides says. These screenings are mandatory in the U.S. Parents don't have to provide consent, although they may opt out on religious grounds. Newborn blood samples can also be used for biomedical research, and only a handful of states require parental consent for those research purposes. Salides says parents deserve to know how their children's DNA is being stored and shared, and for how long. To learn how often New Jersey police try to obtain this genetic data, the Office of the Public Defender and the New Jersey Monitor initially filed a records request with the state, asking how many times police had asked for newborn screening samples and which law enforcement agencies made the requests. When the state declined to answer, Salides says the office filed a suit to force the state to disclose how widespread the practice is in New Jersey. Salides says she hopes the suit will spur the state to reconsider how newborn genetic samples should be used. We think there are changes that can be made to the way this information is being stored, and that parents should have very clear access to that information, she says. Make sure to check out our other Wired podcasts. Today in Wired Business, we look at how fans of a suspected killer are still promoting him online.
All righty. So, let's stop screen share. All right. So we can get into it. So that was a bit of an introduction, if you will, into exactly what is happening on this stage with newborn baby DNA. So, as you just heard, the argument being made is that it is a violation of your Fourth Amendment right, right? Your constitutional right against unreasonable search and seizure to have a newborn baby's DNA, right? Possibly your baby, used against you in a criminal case. Okay. And now we've also heard that every state, well, all institutions in each states have some sort of newborn database, but they're kind of all over the place with the timing. So you have some states that only keep the newborn baby's DNA on file for 6 months. You have others that keep the newborn baby's DNA on file indefinitely. So, a lot of very interesting things going on here. Now, I want to point out something else to you all. Let me go ahead and bring up this link. So, as I did my research on this topic, I discovered something very, very interesting. Now, as I told you all, I only recently became aware of this practice. But as I did my research on this topic, I came to find out that this is not new. This is not a new occurrence. So let me show you exactly what I mean here. Again, share screen. Why? I don't know. I always announce it. Here we are. We're looking at the Texas Tribune. This article is entitled DNA Deception. When they were sued last year for storing baby blood samples without parental consent, Texas health officials said they did it for medical research. They never said that they turned over the blood samples to the federal government to help build a vast DNA database. Listen to what you just heard. Now, the case that we heard, right, has someone whose DNA was turned over to state police, and the state did this and the state did that. Now we're hearing that you have hospitals turning over DNA to the federal government for them to build one big database that contains everyone's DNA. Now, I want to bring to your attention the date of this article, okay? February 22nd, 2010. 2010. So, since at least 2010, hospitals have been handing over baby DNA to the federal government and to state governments since at least 2010. And as we dive into this next article, you'll come to realize that that's when we started, and by we, I mean the public, started to know it was happening. But that doesn't even mean that was the beginning. Okay. Let me dive into some of these questions. So, Kimberly Callahan would like to know, do parents realize what is happening to their baby's DNA? No, Kimberly. Parents do not realize what is happening to their baby's DNA until, well, they're arrested for a crime that happened in 1996. Then they're saying, well, how did you get my DNA? And then these things are being discovered. Black Anonymous says they could have been doing this without our knowledge before 2010. Exactly. This could have been happening long before 2010 because let me tell you, back when I was born, a blood sample was taken and I was screened for genetic diseases and da 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 because I was, well, not I, because I didn't know, but my parents were told when I was born that I have the sickle cell trait because they did that whole screening thing. Okay. And I don't want to age myself, but let's put it this way, I wasn't born in 2010. Okay. Okay. I was born a little while before 2010. Okay. Let's get back into this. A Texas Tribune review of 9 years worth of emails and internal documents. Okay. Let's go back to Black Anonymous's statement. This article came out in 2010, and at that time, they were reviewing 9 years worth of emails. So they were reviewing things that went back to 2001. Okay. A Texas Tribune review of 9 years worth of emails and internal documents on the Department of State Health Services newborn blood screening program, released after the state settled the case so quickly that it never even reached the discovery phase, shows an effort to limit the public's knowledge of the program. Did y'all hear that? I might need to read it again. I don't know. I don't know if you heard that. Okay. There was a lawsuit where emails were received dating back to 2001, which seemed to show that allegedly the state of Texas was seeking to limit how much the public knew about their whole newborn blood screening program and about them allegedly handing over the newborn DNA to the federal government. Someone sued them because of it, and they settled the case very quickly. Okay. Hello, Michelle Jordan. How are you doing? Long time no see. Let's continue. Oh my goodness, this is scary. So when state health officials were sued last year, again, that's 2009, not 2010, for storing infant blood samples without parental consent, they said that it was for medical research, which, of course, that's what they would say. Okay. They never said they were turning over hundreds of blood samples to the federal government to help build a vast DNA database, a tool designed to identify missing persons and crack cold cases. Again, y'all, we're hearing now about the state police, but understand that this article is insinuating that the federal government is building an entire federal database that they're going to use to crack cold cases, and they're using newborn baby DNA to build this DNA database. Okay. Kimberly Callahan says, wow, wow, wow. Listen, wow, wow, wow. Now, I would imagine that when parents have their children in the Michelle Jordan Hospital, right, at Christopher Quintero Memorial Hospital, right? I'm just using random names in the chat. And your newborn baby's DNA is taken, you believe, as you're probably told, that it's to screen your baby for diseases, not to store your baby's DNA and hand it over to the feds and to the state police to use to potentially prosecute you and your family members. Because what y'all should remember is DNA has numerous of links, right? Some of them kind of existential, some of them more direct. So remember that, yes, in this instance, we're talking about a father being prosecuted with his newborn baby's DNA, but you could prosecute that baby's cousin. You could prosecute that baby's uncle, that baby's aunt, that baby's great grandmother. That DNA link can be used to prosecute anyone that is related to the baby. All right. Hello to Christopher Quintero. How are you? Yeah, this is definitely wild. Definitely wild. Let's get back into it. This is so crazy. A Texas Tribune review of 9 years worth of emails and internal documents on the Department of State Health Services newborn blood screening program reveals the transfer of hundreds of infant blood spots to an armed forces lab to build a national and someday international mitochondrial DNA registry. Look how deep this goes. Do you see how deep this goes? Not only a national database, y'all, but it came out in this lawsuit that the federal government allegedly has an interest in building an international database. So, partnering with other countries to have an international DNA database. I'm speechless. Wow, Jay. Hi, Jay. All right, back into it. So the records released after the state agreed in December to destroy more than 5 million infant blood spots and also, oh, wait, hold on. Let me read that again. The records released after the state agreed in December to destroy more than 5 million infant blood spots also show an effort to limit the public's knowledge of the aspects of the newborn blood program and to manage the debate around it. Now, that was flowery language. So, allow me to break it down for y'all. In this lawsuit, they discovered that not only was the state of Texas and the federal government doing what they were accused of, allegedly, right? Have to say that. But they made efforts to limit how much people knew about it. They didn't want the public to know about it. And they made efforts to try to quell any conversation, quell any questioning that could lead the people to discovering it. So not only was it allegedly happening back then, back in the early 2000s, but there was also supposedly an effort to see to it that the people, the general public, did not know that it was happening. Now, I want to ask you all a question. I want to see what you think. The state of Texas was allegedly ordered, right? Or rather, they agreed to. Let me be mindful of my words. Allegedly, as a part of settlement, the state of Texas agreed to destroy more than 5 million infant blood samples. My people in the chat, do you think they destroyed those samples? I'm just curious. I'm not insinuating anything. I don't know. I wasn't there. I just wonder what you think. Give me a 1 in the chat if you think yes. Come on. This is the state of Texas. They're going to do what's right. They were ordered to destroy them and they destroyed them. Put a 2 in the chat if you think that it's possible or that maybe these samples were not actually destroyed. 1 in the chat if you think the state of Texas actually destroyed these samples as they agreed to. 2 in the chat if you think that potentially these samples are still out there. Black Anonymous has a comment here. He says, I seem to remember a guy who did a 23andMe test. Oh my goodness. Only to learn that his uncle, a retired sheriff deputy, was found to be connected to a series of killings in their area. Oh my, do I need to read that again? Black Anonymous says, I seem to remember a guy who did a 23andMe test only to learn that his uncle, a retired sheriff deputy, was found to be connected to a series of killings in their area. Coincidence? Who knows? I see quite a bit of 2s. Man, y'all are cynical, huh? Oh. Y'all are some little cinny bennies. Cynical folks. No one thinks the state of Texas actually did what they said they would. Come on now. This is the great state of Texas. The who do we have to thank Texas for? We got to thank Texas for Destiny's Child, Beyonce. I feel like Lizzo might be from Texas, maybe. Meg, all your faves, right? I'm surprised to see you all are so cynical about the state of Texas. Interesting. Well, let's continue. Oh my goodness. The plaintiffs who filed the lawsuit never saw them, meaning the plaintiffs never saw a lot of these documents because the state settled the case so quickly that it never reached the discovery phase. Allegedly. Interesting. Okay, so here we go. They found a spokesperson. Okay, so DSHS spokeswoman Carrie Williams says that while the department's general philosophy was to save the blood for public health research, they did not have an exclusive policy. What? Let me get this straight. Is she saying that they were taking these babies' DNA and they didn't even have a policy on when to use the DNA, when not to use the DNA, who to give it to and who not to give it to? Is that what she's saying? Wow. There's been a lot of wow moments. Hey, T-Vam, what's up? How are you? I mean, this is just, you keep saying wow, 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 wow. This is unbelievable. She then goes on to say that DSHS participated in the project because they believed it would help in missing persons cases. Again, they knew that it would be used in criminal cases. They're trying to flowery it up and say missing persons, right? But if the investigation of an alleged missing person is believed to be an alleged homicide, you have a criminal case. And as we know, the DNA wasn't only being used for missing persons, right? But they're low key. I like to share with you guys when you have different officials kind of in a cutesy way, like throwing each other under the bus. And so what you have here is the state of Texas is low key saying that they did not understand the extent of what the federal government was doing. They're kind of insinuating here that they really believed that it was just to find people who were missing. Okay. All right. Let's continue. Jim Harrington, the civil rights attorney who filed the lawsuit, believes that DSHS meant to deceive the public. Interesting. When he was negotiating with state officials, he specifically asked what the blood was being used for. Interesting. And there was no mention of the federal project. Y'all listen to that. You guys, let me run it back for you. A lawyer said to the state of Texas, hey, what are you using this newborn baby blood database situation for? And the state of Texas, given the opportunity to tell the truth, they did not disclose what they were using it for until the lawsuit. Even more interesting. Okay, well, they then go on to say that for decades we've been screening newborns, which we know that. Okay, we know that. Allegedly, the state of Texas began storing newborn baby DNA in 2002. That's the allegation. The allegation is that before 2002, they did take the DNA. See here, until 2002, the cards were thrown out after a short storage period. So, state of Texas alleges that yes, they kept the DNA before, but it was for a short time. They allege that it was not until 2002 that they actually began to create this database and share this database. Interesting. Okay, so I'm just scrolling through here. Wow. Very, very interesting. Now let's get a little bit more into exactly what the federal government wanted to do with this information. All right, so eventually, research proposals indicate federal officials hoped to be able to share this data worldwide for international law enforcement and investigation in the context of homeland security and anti terrorism efforts. Aha! Interesting. So, how many of you are aware of the Patriot Act? Now, I want to share something with you that you may or may not have heard, right? Depending on how much of a cinny binny you are. But there are many people who believe that the Patriot Act was really just used as a conduit for spying on Americans. And so, whenever you hear anyone that represents the government saying that some sort of human information is being collected in the context of homeland security and anti-terrorism efforts, it's kind of trying to fall under that umbrella, right? And it's kind of trying to say, well, we should be able to do this as the federal government because we're doing it for the protection of the people. Again, is that what is actually happening? Because when this DNA is handed over, as we've heard, Americans are being prosecuted for crimes that are not terrorism and are not homeland security. So, interesting thought. Kimberly Callahan says, this makes me wonder why Texas is among the states who are so adamantly pro-life. Yeah, interesting. Interesting comment. Let's see what other gems this article has to offer before we move on. Okay, they just get into that case, which we've already gone there. Hmm. Hmm. Let's see. Interesting. Huh. This is getting even more juicy, y'all. So I'm going to give you the paraphrasing because, by the way, you guys, part of my profession is that I read a lot. and I've always been an avid reader, so I can read crazy fast. So I'm going to give you all kind of my synthesis because I already read that whole section in like 2 seconds. Okay, so here it is. So what happened was in 2001, right, there was a bill that would have set parameters around this newborn baby DNA collection. Because remember, the state of Texas themselves admitted that they had no parameters. They're just kind of doing whatever they want. Now, the insinuation here, the allegation here is that the government in Texas took active steps to kill that bill so that there were no limitations set on what they could do with this DNA. Now, this article then goes on to say that the emails that were dated back to 2003 have the state of Texas admitting that they have a parental consent issue, right? That what they're doing may not be constitutional because they're not getting the consent of the parents of these children. Okay, so make no mistake, it doesn't seem like these entities are confused about whether or not they should be getting parents' consent. Rather, it seems that allegedly they want to be able to skirt around the parental consent portion of everything. Alrighty, so listen, I'm gonna hop into this. We have to get into some more of our commentary because we're going to run out of time, right? If we read all of these articles. So now, before I delve into constitutional rights, before we go there, let me ask you all, what questions do you have for me? All right. And then we have one more article I'm going to pop up after I take some questions. All right. Kimberly Callahan says the more babies, the more DNA to collect. I mean, mathematically, that's correct. Mathematically, that is correct. Mathematically, the more babies you have being born, the more DNA there is to collect. Hmm. So if you're just joining us, let me catch you up to speed. I had my brain literally, my brain lost its own train of thought for a second. So if you're just joining us, let me catch you up to speed. So I have come into the information that newborn babies are being used to build DNA databases, which are then being used to prosecute their parents. I have to say, allegedly. Why? Because it's just safer. Okay. In the state of New Jersey, a man was prosecuted with a cold case, or is being prosecuted, excuse me, in relation to a cold case from the 1990s after his newborn baby's DNA was used. Okay. Now, you would think this is something recent. Well, as we've been exploring, it is not. It is not because the state of Texas was caught doing the same thing, allegedly, back in 2002. So we're having this conversation about the context under which DNA is collected and whether or not there are constitutional implications for taking DNA under one context, right? But then using it in another. And so right now the floor is open for questions. I'm saying, what questions do you have for me? And I wonder if I should invite y'all backstage. Yeah, you know what? I have one more article, but I do want to start inviting you all backstage because I really want to start taking the questions and delving into some of the constitutional questions. There is the link. You all are welcome to come backstage. All right. So Black Anonymous says, the crazy thing is that I can see why someone whose relative is missing and presumed dead would want this so they can learn what happened to their loved one. Black Anonymous says, I can also see how this can be considered a gross invasion of privacy. And Black Anonymous, what you're talking about is consent. Okay. And that's the issue that the state of Texas allegedly acknowledged they were trying to skirt around, right? Consent is the issue you have there. If Black Anonymous and Kimberly Callahan welcome a beautiful baby girl, right? Let's say they name her Kia. And the hospital says, Mr. and Mrs. Anonymous, would you like to enter your baby's DNA into our newborn baby DNA database? We use it to help find missing persons, and sometimes it is used to help solve crimes. Well, then Mr. and Mrs. Anonymous, right? They can make the informed decision as to whether or not they want to release the baby's DNA. But that is not what is happening, y'all. Let's make sure we know what's happening. What's happening is Mr. and Mrs. Anonymous have a baby, right? Baby Kia. The DNA is taken. They believe it's being used to screen her for medical issues, but then it's being handed over to law enforcement. Okay. I'm going to copy and paste the link again, welcoming people backstage so we can have the conversation. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your questions. What are your questions for me on this? Do you want to talk some more, discuss some more about the constitutional implications? And while I wait for someone to come backstage, I'm going to pull up your Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizure. Okay, so we can talk about that some more. Now, if you're a newbie here, because if you're an oldie, well, I don't call y'all oldies, excuse me. If you're an OG, right? If you're an OG, you already know the Constitution like the back of your hand, right? You already know. But if you're a newbie, you may not be familiar with the Fourth Amendment and you may not be familiar with what unreasonable search and seizure is. Okay. All right. We have a question here from Red Spot. What's up, Red Spot? Red Spot says, hello, Miss Esquire. What does a hospital do with your blood after testing patients for annual health screening? Huh. You know what? Red Spot, at this point, we're not sure. We know what is happening with the newborn baby DNA. But we're actually not sure at this point if hospitals are storing adult DNA as well. I mean, if you go into the hospital as a patient, are they storing your DNA? We do not know. We don't know. All right. Welcoming Kim to the stage. Before I do so, though, Kim, I know that you're amazing, right? But I got to remind y'all panel rules: no profanity, no negativity, just in general, no tomfoolery, okay? And no name dropping. Welcome up, Kim.
Hi, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good, good, good. I feel bad. I think I saw that you did a live a few weeks ago, and I felt so bad that I missed it. Um,
Oh, no, you're fine. You can always catch the replay.
I can always join the replay gang, right?
That's
Um,
right.
so this is really, really, really. I think this is a gross invasion. I really do, especially if the parent is not consenting to it. If you think that they're taking a blood sample from your precious newborn to screen for illnesses, etc., but then they're doing something else, in my opinion, that's a gross invasion of privacy. They're doing it without the parental consent, and it's just really, really, really an invasion, in my opinion.
Kim, I can totally see how you feel that. And that's why I said, when I gave the Mr. and Mrs. Anonymous example, I
Mhm.
think consent is a turning point here, right?
I
If
think
you
so
as
too.
a parent, yeah, if you as a parent want to consent to that, let's say you have a cousin that's missing or, and you feel called to consent to that, I
Right,
feel like that's your business. Go ahead and consent.
right.
But is it okay, right, for that to happen without your consent? And I do think
No,
that the attorney who made the argument about the Fourth Amendment may be onto something, right?
I
So,
think so too.
right, let me go ahead and share my screen here and show you guys a quick little snippet about the Fourth Amendment. Like I said, the OGs know, but for the newbies, right? And as you know, we use reputable sources. And you do not need to go to someone else to tell you what the government has said. Why? Because the government loves to talk. And so they say things themselves. So here we are at uscourts.gov. What does the Fourth Amendment mean? Okay, so your Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable search and seizure. They do note it's not a guarantee against all searches. Remember, it's just searches that are deemed to be unreasonable.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, your next question will be, well, what determines when something is unreasonable? Here's the main federal case, right? This is Minnesota v. Carter. The extent to which an individual is protected by the Fourth Amendment depends in part on the location of the search or seizure. Now, many of these cases when these cases came down, they were talking about the physical location, right? Like,
Mhm.
is it your home? Is it your car? Is it your friend's house? But this word location applies to what we're discussing today. Because do you think that it is reasonable for the federal government to be able to search your newborn baby?
No.
Aha! Right. You see,
Yeah.
so I'm sure attorneys are going to argue that it is unreasonable for law enforcement to enact a search against the person of a newborn baby. I'm almost certain that's part of the argument. Everyone in the chat, what do you think about Kim's opinion? Do you think, or do you agree rather, that it's a gross um privacy violation for your newborn baby's DNA to be used for something other than what you consent to? Put a 1 in the chat if you're on board with Kim, or put a 2 in the chat if you feel like, hey, crime is up and we have to do whatever we can to catch these criminals. Because I know people are on both sides. So let's see what everyone else thinks, Kim. In the meantime, let's see. Oh, well, let me mention this. This will be good for the newbies. Okay. So Kim mentioned consent, right? She's right on point. Okay. Consent is one of your exceptions to the Fourth Amendment. So if an officer is given consent to search, they can search. That's Davis v. United States. Okay. If the search is incident to a lawful arrest. Now, let me explain that because I can see some people jumping out the window on that one. That is when a person is being arrested. So, for example, I am being arrested in my bedroom, right? For some reason. Well, let me not use that. That gets too complicated. Run it back. I am being arrested outside by a black fence, right? Because the police are lawfully, I don't even like saying I'm being arrested. Let's use another example. Carl is being arrested outside by a black fence. Okay. Because the police are lawfully arresting Carl, they can search the area they arrested him in. So they can search along the fence, they can look around, they can check because it is a lawful arrest. So that is when they are actually arresting the person. That is not use your DNA and then they arrest you later and now they use the DNA so it's lawful. No, not all of that confusion. It is someone being arrested in real time. All right. Then you have the exigent circumstances exception. The best way to explain that exception is the bank robber who's on the run, right? Police are in pursuit of a man who has robbed a bank. He runs into your home. Yes, the police can come into your house without your permission. It's an exigent circumstance, it is an emergency, and they last saw this person running into your home. Then the final exception is items that are in plain view. That's pretty obvious. If a police officer pulls you over and you have cocaine in plain view, you have just consented to them being able to search that item and that area. Okay. All right, so I see quite a few ones in the chat. Okay, so Kim, it looks like everyone's kind of on board with you.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting about this is that this speaks to, I think, in a lot of respects, that the law has not caught up to technology. And so there is the ability to do DNA testing and all these different kind of things. But I don't know that the law has caught up to what technology allows to be done.
That's
I
a
think,
very good point. Very
yeah.
good point. Yeah, I agree with you that part of the issue is that the law has to come up to speed with what is
Yeah.
happening technologically, especially as DNA development has been just evolving so quickly. I mean, over the
Yeah.
span of about the last decade, what they're able to do with DNA testing now is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
So, and that also makes me wonder. I was considering doing the ancestry.com DNA, but now I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to do it.
You
Not
know,
because I'm afraid that I've committed a crime, because I know I have not.
well,
But who knows, right?
right. Well, first of all, let me say this, Kim, because I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that if you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to hide. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I'm a constitutional purist. I firmly believe in your right to privacy. And I think it would have been perfectly reasonable for you to say, I just don't want them to have my DNA. It doesn't mean you committed a crime. Maybe you
Right.
just don't want them to have it. It is yours. It is
Yeah.
your DNA, right? And I feel the same way about our cell phones and our email, and it is yours to have. And I believe that you should have privacy to that. Now, to your question about it, I'll add this. Well, Kim, depending on where your family members were born and depending on
Hmm.
where you were born, they
Hmm.
might already have your DNA portrait. They might not have yours, but they might already have enough.
Yeah, that could be, because I don't know if some of my relatives have had to submit DNA. You know.
Right. And as I said, depending on where some of the babies in your family have been born, because again, like
Mhm.
I said, I wasn't born yesterday and they took mine and they
Yeah.
let my parents know the day that I was born about
Yeah.
what was going on in my blood.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also it kind of plays on your parenting. So if I have a baby, I want my baby to be safe and healthy. And if there is any issues going on, I think as a parent, I have a right to know if there's some health concerns, etc. But am I giving that up? Am I what am I trying to say here? Am I getting the information about my child while giving up my right to privacy?
Very good point. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kim, because I want to mention something. Now we're talking about how alarming this is, and it's such a problem, and what do we do? But guess what? There is a solution here. Hello to Terry's Notary and Apostle Services LLC. And hello to Empress Kaya. Empress Kaya says she's watching or listening from the clouds. That's perfectly fine. Or as Diva would call it, the bushes. Um, but there is a bit of a solution here, if you will. So allow me to share the potential solution with you all.
Of course.
So again, these newborn baby samples are supposedly taken for testing of genetic diseases and et cetera, right? Supposedly. Now, a private pediatrician can do the same testing. However, your privacy rights are different with a private pediatrician because now you have HIPAA. And HIPAA is a higher level of protection than dealing with these hospitals and these public institutions. So, theoretically, again, I'm just saying this in theory, I don't know, theory, wink. If someone were to have a baby and have that baby tested by a private pediatrician as opposed to a public health institution, theoretically, that baby's DNA would not be put into a public database.
I see. So what if you can't afford a private pediatrician? So,
Yeah, that's again, we
yeah,
already we live in a society where money talks, right?
yeah,
We know
yeah,
that we're evolving, and I say evolving to be positive.
yeah,
We're evolving in a way that it really is going to matter what you have access to monetarily. There will
yeah.
be certain things that you will not be able to protect yourself from if you don't have a certain monetary status. Is it fair?
Right,
No.
right.
But I think we may be headed there. And
Yeah.
I can see how this is one of those instances because if you're home birthing and using your own private medical services, you could theoretically curtail this whole thing,
Hmm.
but that is costly.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic, that's for sure. And it
It,
brings up quite a few legal, moral, ethical issues. And it'll be interesting to see how the topic evolves.
yes,
So
I'm very
yeah,
interested to see how this, and I will keep you all updated on how the lawsuit evolves. It is still in litigation. So we have to see what occurs. But I mean, this is
I'll
very,
step down and give somebody else a chance. Thank
yes,
you.
go ahead, Kim.
Okay, thanks. Bye bye.
All right, so we just had a lovely convo with Kim. Empress Kaya kind of agreeing that yes, private physicians, they're covered by HIPAA. And by the way, you guys, HIPAA is your call it medical protection law, right? And it pretty much says, hey, you have a right to your medical privacy, if you will. Okay, so your doctor cannot just share your medical information. Okay, it's a higher level of privacy than your DNA being given to a public institution. What's up, OCOV fam? So, True Strong Warrior, hello, by the way, says, I just took training for work and they said that we are all held to HIPAA laws. I work for the government. Well, here's the thing. Remember that HIPAA, as it applies to a private institution, is different than HIPAA as it applies to the alleged government, right? So when I say HIPAA, I'm talking about private institutions because HIPAA for them is unequivocal. HIPAA is not unequivocal for the government because the government uses instances such as anti-terrorism, homeland security, this, and that, which again, that is why they're being sued. By the way, they're being sued because of that. But the government uses caveats to get around it. So HIPAA is not really unequivocal when it comes to the government. And I'm sure you know, True Strong Warrior, as someone who works for the government, that none of these things are unequivocal with the government. Okay, they skirt around privacy laws all the time because they're the government. That's just kind of how that works. But the conversation that we're having is whether or not it is constitutional to do so. Does anyone else have questions for me? If not, I'm going to hop out because I'll be back at 6:30, where we'll be talking about the new Umar Johnson lawsuit, y'all, and our channel. Notice I said our, right? Because we is us, us is we, we together, me and you will never part, y'all know Color Purple. Because it's us. So our channel is cited in the complaint of this new Umar Johnson lawsuit. So if there are no other questions for me, right, no other discussions to be had. Now, this is an in-depth topic that I'm going to continue to follow. Do you have questions for me on the Constitution? Do you have questions for me on HIPAA or anything else? Going once, going twice. Let me drop the link again, just in case someone wants to come backstage. And the link is in the chat. Again, I'm going to give you all a minute or so before I hop out. So we'll run the intro. Oh, True Strong Warrior says I read out loud. That was me reading the comment or reading. Oh, you know what I mean, y'all. True Strong Warrior says, sorry I didn't speak, but I was listening and cooking for the bushes. Oh, that's fine. Hello. Nap said he got another one. He sure do got another one. He sure do another one. And our channel is mentioned in the complaint. So, we got to check that out. You got to check that out. Us legal nerds got to look into that. Alrighty, so listen, I love y'all. You bring something unique to this world, to this channel, to my life, and I love you for it. Listen, before I head on out, shout out to the content creators in the chat. Shout out to Black Anonymous. Check out his channel. He does some amazing commentary. Shout out to Naps, the artiste formerly known as Nappy Yankee, right? Check out his commentary. Shout out to the whole OCOV fam. Let me find I'm gonna have to scroll a little bit more. Shout out to the whole OCOV fam. I believe a lot of them have channels. I'm not sure if True Strong does, but I believe a lot of them do. And shout out to Terry's Notary LLC. I believe that Terry has a channel. All right. So support the fam. Go and check these folks out. Subscribe to them. Like their videos. Do all that stuff. All right. Because at the end of the day, what we are building here is community. And I'm here to tell you that whether a community is 100 people or 100,000 is not what matters. What matters is the quality of the connection that community has. I don't care what the numbers on this channel are, because we have built a community that is of such quality. Y'all enrich my life, and I hope I enrich yours. All right. So, anyway, I'll see you later.